So we actually took up this book again, the Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant, and it's actually one of the books with the most exciting overview of all the history in the most short way to express it. Like such a big lens on the whole recorded history, and it always impresses me when I read it. How do you feel about the book, Peyton?
Same. I love books that are just so information dense that every sentence feels like you have to pause and reflect on exactly what he was saying. There's
Yes,
so much meat in the book just packed
definitely.
into every single paragraph. He doesn't waste a word, and it's so brief, but yet it's so ambitious at the same time, trying to paint these large, sweeping trends of what can we learn from history? What does history teach us about the fundamental motivations and ends of man that we can use to better understand where things are going to go, how things will arise based off of different circumstances, and how people in positions of power will react and use certain tools available to them.
hmm And also the overview over patterns which Will and Oriel recognized just writing about history. I guess in the preface they say they reread the 10 volumes about the story of civilization they wrote, and then thought about all those patterns they recognized and tried to find evidence for them and so on. But it's impressive. It's an impressive achievement. Just wow! It's a wow book. It's one of the books that change minds.
Yeah, it really is. And his ability to kind of look through things and see commonalities and see, okay, the circumstance between Alexander the Great and Trotsky look so different. The things that they did look so different on the surface, but underneath, what are they both doing? What are both of the civilizations doing? How do they use the will of their people? How did they speak to the fundamental biology of man? And how is the completely different era and playing field something that just changes the appearances rather than what changes what's underneath? And
Mhm.
just that's just one example. Like there's so many circumstances in which, according to Will, and he makes quite a great case for it, the nature of man
Mhm.
simply plays out with different circumstances, different tools, different power dynamics, different geographies, different professed ideologies and language around why they do what they do and how they do what they do. But
Mhm.
in the end, they're still playing the same game that they were playing thousands of years ago. And I think
Yes.
it gets so clear when you look at the different behaviors, the different rise and fall of individuals, of power systems, of
Yes.
nations, of systems of belief, of systems of economics and morals. It's fascinating to observe that although these things can seem like they're polar opposites, although they can seem diametrically opposed, and like every single action they take is in opposite directions. In reality, underneath them is a common pattern, because underneath them is, and within them is humans. There's human nature, there's our
Mm.
fundamental biology, and there are the common ends of man, the common ends of those in power that have.
Oh, now the connection
Yeah,
interrupts shortly.
yeah. On my end, I think that it's probably my fault. My internet tends to be shoddy at times.
Oh, no problem, no worries. So next time I just wait without saying the internet connection disrupt. Yes, catching up on your stream of thoughts, it's like he said that the nature of man has not changed thousands of years, but the habits of man changed, not the nature of man. And also that not the earth makes civilization, but men do. And definitely the civilization emerges out of the nature of man and makes for creative space to develop different habits as well.
I apologize for that. Seems that as soon as we figure out everything else, now it's the internet that has to get to us.
Great. So many
Oh,
ways that life can get us.
exactly, exactly. It's a little stoic test for us today.
Yes, all day long. Uh,
Yes,
so nature um, and not the nature of man makes civilization, not the earth or the geography. One idea that totally impressed me was um, that the invention of airplanes just widened the possibilities for men to do travel, to do merchants, to do business, and so on, and not to be bound to river and seasides, but to have this whole array of possibilities widened up, trade emerging even faster and better, and it's such a like a view quake for me, or something I did not know yet or did not see yet. And some passages of this book was a view quake like this. Did you have
agreed.
some of
Because
those?
yes, definitely. And with the airplane, I find it so interesting how he showed how the technological change, which of course is fairly democratized. Once somebody invents the airplane, it's no longer Wilbur and Orville Wright in North Carolina on a paper plane. It
Hmm.
soon becomes every country in World War I that's really competing is flying planes and shooting at each other in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequences of that end up landing completely not the same, because there were certain countries, certain players that benefited tremendously from the old ways of things. You think of up until World War One, it was Great Britain that was the most powerful country, and it's because, in large part, they controlled the seas. They're just a small island off of Europe, but they had by far the most powerful navy in the
Mm-hmm.
world, and they were in such a strong position as basically an island on the sea and everybody in the UK living within 50 miles of the ocean or something along those lines. They were
They
just
were the most able seamen the world had to offer at this time.
exactly. And so they had such an outsized power. I mean, it's honestly incredible. Like, it's insane how this small island off the coast of Europe controlled 25% of the world's landmass at some
Uh-huh.
point. And so, and you can trace it back in large part to their ability to absolutely dominate the oceans everywhere they went. And they had that incredible strength. And then once the airplane gets invented, that no longer is a choke point by which you can control everything else. They fall from being by far the most supreme power on earth to being one amongst a handful of powers,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually very clearly not number one or number two again because they don't have that incredible choke point that they once had. And then you can see, okay, what are the what are the things that are similar to that in current day where there's a few people that hold a choke point that are just an incredible source of power and influence that is going away and the field is about to be leveled. In my opinion, that is what Silicon Valley is today to the United
Hmm.
States, where we used to be literally the far outlier of producing significant innovation with technology and highly scalable companies, especially in information technology, that can become outstandingly influential, enormously wealth creating, very powerful in ways that a lot of people underestimate. If you think about Google, if you think about
Hmm.
Facebook, and it was a huge advantage that the United States had, in California in particular, for especially 1995 until 2018 or something like that, where it was this golden goose that laid all the eggs
Hmm.
and created all of this wealth and power and prosperity while getting while kind of contributing quite a bit back into the local and national economy in terms of capital, in terms of taxation, productivity, imports, things along those lines. And what I think most people still are slow to realize, at least in the US, is that we don't have that anymore. There's no boundary around Silicon Valley like there used to be, where you had to go there if you wanted the network to build the company. You had to go where the rest of the entrepreneurs are and where the capital was and where the angel investors were and where the exit opportunities were and where all the other competitors that would buy you, like the Googles and the Facebooks, buying you when you're $1 billion enterprise valuation,
Hmm.
or even the place to be a unicorn because that's where all the talent is that you need to hire as you grow. We don't have that anymore. Now you can work virtually from anywhere. You can be working for, I have a friend that works for Google and lives in Australia a lot of
Oh,
the year. And I have um, a lot of friends from my old corporate days who are basically nomadic because they don't have to go to the office anymore. And so they don't
yes.
have to pay these crazy rents and commute. And especially when you think of San Francisco, deal with what I understand and what I've seen is ridiculous crime, horrible
Yes.
conditions, very just some legitimately uncivilized stuff going on in what's
Homeless
ostensibly
people defeasing on the street,
exactly, yeah,
parking tickets everywhere.
it's a complete shit show. And I think that people may still be underestimating the implications of that for the United States and for, I mean, California, I think is on its way to free fall, as is New York City. And it's, in my opinion, analogous to the UK's Navy. They were just so powerful. And then the
Hmm.
technology shifted. There's a
Yes.
new thing that flattens the playing field and makes it to where you can't be at this choke point anymore and charge a thick toll and
Mm.
have people pay any price in order to use this gate that you've built or whatever you would want to call it.
The gates crumble down. And if I'm allowed to quote from the book, he writes the influence of geographic factors diminishes as technology grows. The
Huh.
character and contour of a terrain may offer opportunities for agriculture, mining, or trade, but only the imagination and initiative of leaders and the hardy industry of followers can transform the possibilities into fact.
Hmm.
Man,
That's
not
brilliant.
the earth, makes civilization. And yes, with all this remote work that is going on today, um, the pandemic accelerated it. And now we have these conditions where everybody has now the ability to do partial home office or even full-time home office, and then it's location independent. You have to be maybe in similar time zones, so it's better for communication because everybody is on the same time schedule as the other one, does not sleep half the day when the other one is working, so communication flows are better. So maybe there's also the trend going that in each time zones it's this vertical line. Maybe those people will work together more than in this horizontal line.
I agree.
Yours.
Yeah, the Earth is going to become flattened.
Yes, definitely, at least in terms of working together.
And
Mm.
it kind of fits a lot of other, I guess, natural grooves of who would naturally work together as well. If in large part, not a perfect pattern, but if you think about who is it easy for someone in the East Coast of the US to communicate with, way easier to build a bridge between someone speaking Spanish and English than it is somebody speaking Thai and English, or
Mhm.
somebody speaking um, Punjabi, or whatever the case may be. I think that, and same if you go south of Europe, you get to Africa, where due to the 1800s, most of them are speaking English, French, or German,
Mm.
or something that's descended not too far from it. And the languages tend to track fairly well, not perfectly, of course, but decently well with longitude.
Mhm. Definitely. And the agricultural in the agricultural revolution, there was this horizontal line where everything
Mm,
evolved in a much faster pace, going uh, west and eastwards. But nowadays, it's the flattening of the Earth, like you uh, indicated as well. Yes.
yeah. My favorite idea from the lessons of history that I think is just it's a universal acid that cuts through almost everything that we can see in history
Hmm.
is Will Durant's concept of history is a fragment of biology. We are fundamentally still animals. We think we've left the game, but we're still rocking chromosomes. We still have to reproduce. We still have to survive. This is still natural selection. I think
Hmm.
it was Yuval Noah Harari that said that man likes to categorize what we do into unnatural and natural, but the fact is it's all natural. We're still biological creatures, like acting on biological drives,
Yes.
and we've just added many more layers of complexity and organization on
Hmm.
top of our biological drives and our fundamental nature. And it goes back to competition. He had the quote, competition is the trade of life, not just the life of trade. And it's so true. It arrives in every single instance throughout human history in
Yes.
many forms. And it's not just a simple game of natural selection like you might have in a savanna ecosystem, where you have to be the fastest lion if you want to catch the gazelles, and you have to be not the slowest gazelle if you don't want to get caught by the lion. And so it's just an individual trying to strive against others. Now it's incredibly complex because you have individuals competing against individuals, and then you have above that you have families competing against families within the same community. But then you go to the local community, and now you're a village, and you're trying to outcompete the village next to you. And then you're a collection of villages, and those villages, and you're also, as your village, you're trying to compete for greater power and influence within your collection of villages, and as a family competing for more influence within your village. And so, and then you go all the way up, you have different countries ultimately competing with each other, but you also have the subdivisions and communities within the countries competing for power of that country. And then if you have within your country a game of competition and natural selection that leads to a race to the bottom that ultimately enfeebles your country, then you are going to lose on the international game of competition. You have, for example, in the Cold War, if somebody on the side of capitalism or on the side of communism is actively doing stuff that weakens their side, then ultimately, even if they're winning the game of natural selection within their community on a temporary basis, it could lead to, in theory, the overtaking of their entire system by an external actor. And so the each system has to optimize for what will enable it to compete on the largest scale. But
Hmm.
within each of the systems, there's just a huge set of nested competitions and prisoners' dilemmas, as we can see quite clearly in modern Western democracy, that leads to just a very wide range of outcomes that at their core even though they transpire in ways that could never be predicted, at their core, they're driven by drives and motivations of individuals or of actors within a certain level of competition that are
Hmm.
fundamentally understandable. They're we can see the drives. The drives are consistent across cultures. The drives are consistent across time. It's
Yes,
humans
yes.
trying to, in groups of humans trying to outvie for power from each other in this very complex nested game. And then you have the overlap of religion, where you have religion vying for, like, competing with other systems of ideas within an individual's mind. You also have religions competing within other religions on the sense of influence over a culture. And then you have religions competing with other religions of basically countries that hold this religion competing with countries that hold this religion, because it tends
Hmm.
to uh, be an axis of alliances. And so if you're
Yes,
going to
yes.
be a successful religion, you have to be able to uh, win some of these games, and maybe some of the games can become more powerful than others. For example, if you can win the game of competing for whatever the king wants, then perhaps he can mandate it, and mandate it into competing into the minds of the individuals of the populace. But fundamentally, all of these systems of ideas, as well as all of the systems of power, are always in this organic game of competition. The logic of what's going on can't be escaped, because if some system tries to step out of the game, that's just going to invite whoever's better at playing the game, whatever system of thought is playing the game, to step in and win the game and become what's surviving and reproducing. And so you can't escape from the logic of what's going on here, whether you're thinking of ideologies, whether you're thinking of political systems, whether you think of individuals within a political system trying to get to the top of it. There's always going to be this pattern, this fundamental pattern of competition and selection emerging in ideas, in systems, in individuals, in peoples. And I think that that is the lens by which you can start to understand the similarities in how you can predict what people are going to do when they rise to power, or what is going to happen after a revolution, or what is going to happen that leads to a revolution,
Hmm.
and start to get your head around the actions of man over the course of time.
Hmm. It's always simple incentives that drive the behavior, and the incentives is ingrained in our nature, and therefore it emerges to every level of the scale. Like you said, competition on every level of the scale, in individual, the family, in the village, the nation, and the whole country or continent, whatever. It's on every level of the scale, this competition of men. Through variety and this array of possibilities, nature plays its favorite game and selects the most able uh, and skilled nation, country, religion, and so on. Yeah, it's a great, mind blowing concept to wrap the head around. And talking about the man and its competition, I pretty much found similarities in this part of the book in the lessons of history concerning the morals. What blew my mind is that pugnancy, brutality, greed, and sexual readiness were advantages in the struggle for existence. And probably every vice was once a virtue. In example, a quality making for the survival of the individual, the family, or the group. Man's sins may be the relics of his rise rather than the stigmata of his fall. And there we can see, okay, if the men, the people rose along these incentives, along these habits of brutality and the ability to kill and so on, and now they have this level of morals on this layer on top of their behavior. But in between nation states, we sometimes still see this behavior of, okay, the most able nation that is uh, most brutal and has the ability to be brutal and not be restricted by a law, or oh, what does the other nation think of me? Thoughts like this. Um, just takes what it wants. See Russia and the Crimea.
Hmm.
You see, they have the ability still, and maybe we can see this history developing a uh, similar moral for nations as well as the time moves on and wars emerge or not. But I like this that man's sins may be the relics of his rise rather than the stigmata of his fall.
That's fascinating. That's such a good
It's
quote.
yeah. So if we have sinned, Father, forgive me for I have sinned, but I guess men came to the point where they have a religious sense and a sense of moral like this because they once have sinned to a point that they survived.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a great point. And he constantly goes back to this quote that man is acquisitive, pugnacious, and erotic.
Mhm. Yes.
And you can see quite clearly how the nature of man is consistent over time. He likes to say that the nature of man changes with geologic time, not with historical time, which in
Mhm.
other words means that it changes over the course of tens of thousands of years as opposed to over the course of hundreds of years.
Mhm.
And the very things that were required for genes to propagate throughout time in our species are oftentimes the things that culture is most eager to tame, if especially if the culture wants to compete with other cultures. Because
Mhm.
imagine two cultures and one of them is able to get all of the men in their 20s to behave and to cooperate and to build as opposed to fight and destroy, and it's able to establish stable families and children that can be raised to be productive and healthy, then it's absolutely going to be far stronger than a country that's enfeebled by inner chaos and violence and everybody in a knife fight amongst themselves.
Yes.
And so the role of religion is very important in establishing a common morality among countries.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how it's used as a tool for those ends over and over throughout history quite effectively. He uses the example of Justinian in 313 AD when Rome's sort of system of morality was in significant decline, and there was very little unity among the people because it was sort of a uh, under-recognized, collapsing system of paganism that didn't have a strong structure to it, and he replaced it with Christianity, which gave it a far more rigid backbone and means of organization and means of common code of morality and expected behaviors. And this cycle of morality, of rigidness and flexibility and adherence versus discombobulation is a significant driver of, according to Will Durant, and I think he makes a pretty strong case of the cycle of civilization, of how civilizations are born in chaos and they establish order and rise, and then eventually they get soft and they fall apart. And
Mhm.
you can case that at the center of that is the common culture, the common morality, the code of conduct, and the ability to unite amongst themselves and to be productive and tame the wilder aspects of nature within a particular culture and society.
Yeah, it's actually great that we sometimes are not able to judge all the institutions that now are there where we find ourselves in, like you are in Ohio, I'm in Switzerland, and we both live inside democracies. In Switzerland, there's a direct democracy going on. The people actually have a voice or are able to organize their voice. And all those institutions emerged through this selection process and somehow had use, somehow were necessary. And also religion, like you said, the religions were able to organize society and um, uh, make the people behave morally and reproduce fast, and therefore, like the Catholic Church gave a bonus to the women who had the most children or whatever. However, I actually know a family where they are very Catholic, and they have 9 children, like,
Hmm.
and but they all are really nice people and really stable and giving value to society, are engineers, priests, or whatever, what have you. And this is not an institution to just dismiss and say, okay, does not do any good because I want to be free, so religion is necessarily bad. But actually, in very often it's the case that we don't see the use or the necessity of a certain thing, that we don't yet understand, because we are just not able to judge this whole process of natural selection of those institutions that we find ourselves living with.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of my favorite examples. It's one of the most overt cases of how natural selection plays out among religions. If you think about it, you have two religions that are competing for what we will call market share of religions. They want to grow in influence, they want to grow in power, they want to control governments more, they want to control the international system of government more, they want to have greater influence over the thoughts and ideas of people. And you have one religion that tries really hard to go out and convince people to join their religion. But that's a game that, of course, every religion, well, not every religion, many religions are playing and many people are weary of. So it's hard to do.
The
But you
missionary
have,
ones, yes.
yes, but you also have the Catholic Church in in what I think is, and I'm not saying that they did it for cynical reasons. This is just how things play out. But it's a tremendously advantageous move if you wanted to increase the influence of your religion. Just make a simple rule within your religion that causes people to reproduce twice as much.
Hmm.
And then by outlawing birth control, by outlawing any form of contraception, and just basically enshrining in your code of conduct, in your code of rules, that you have to do things that lead to a huge proliferation of the population that adheres to that religion. It's an incredible natural selection advantage, comparable to if you were twice as fertile as an individual gene that could double your fertility, then of course that gene would absolutely run off the charts and proliferate throughout the population. If you had a gene that enabled you to um, just be twice as good at attracting members of the opposite sex and getting and reproducing. It's the most successful gene you could possibly have. And it's so interesting how you can basically put this meme into a large group of people, and just that one idea can lead to such a sustained source of growth and power
Over the
and ability
generations,
to
and
stay
this,
exactly over so much time. Just that one idea is responsible for so much of the power of the Catholic Church. And
yes,
I'm not saying that it was done, like, I'm not cynical of that or whatever. It just is a matter of fact that they had that one mutation of their genetic code or of their mimetic code, and that one mutation ended up being incredibly, incredibly advantageous for the game of competition that they're playing.
definitely. It's like a game, theoretically, you play it out over the generations, and then you see how are the incentives aligned, and whatever gets incentivized gets real, like it plays out the way it is incentivized. So you can see, uh, if you say, okay, be fertile and don't use contraceptives, then you can play the game of seeing into the future. Okay, there will be many more of people believing this and behaving like their parents did or their grandfathers do. And the same thing uh, you can see where Taleb brings up his rule of the most intransigent minority always will overpower the big majority without uh, intransigence. Like, you see, he brings up the example of uh, um, the Islam does not allow for people to marry if the other party or person is not the same religion or is no Muslim. So you have to necessarily convert, and you are not allowed to fall off your belief because it's a deadly sin. How is it called?
Apostasy.
Uh, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you can see how it will play out over the long term if you do not have some borders to not borders but some institutions to maybe defend your own cultural heritage because it has not such strict rules. But if you defend it a little bit so that it can have safe space to um, go on further by itself and not be overtaken by another more intransigent belief system, there you can see how it can play out if you cut it loose and just let it play out and say, okay, no borders, no nations, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not a responsible way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
and talking about this, I found a passage in this book where he says, "No man, however brilliant or well informed, can come in one lifetime to such fullness of understanding as to safely judge and dismiss the customs or institutions of his society, for these are the wisdom of generations after centuries of experiment in the laboratory of history."
Hmm. That is a great quote.
Yes, I like it. Such a insightful thing. And actually, rereading this book, I came to the belief that Taleb uh, uh, took many of his ideas and continued them with his train of thoughts. Like many ideas just resonate from this book to Taleb's views and so on. What do you think about? Are there other ideas that resonated with you in this book?
Oh, yeah. One thing that I really am interested in is basically how the lessons of the book in terms of the cycles of civilization, especially thinking of economics, where you have a society, eventually it grows in inequality, and either you have to let off some of the steam of inequality, let off some of the pressure through
Mm-hmm.
redistribution or means of establishing a tolerable existence for the non-winners of the society
Mm-hmm.
versus revolution, and how you get to a level where the inequality is so intolerable that people revolt and rise up, and you have he said you either have the redistribution of wealth through the welfare state or you have the redistribution of poverty through revolution. And I think that it's really true when you look throughout
Yes.
history, like what happens when the society becomes too unequal that it's intolerable for a large portion of the population, and then you look around today in 2021, and honestly, it's hard not to look around and be like, holy shit, like this is really becoming an issue for people, and regardless of whether or not uh, accumulates wealth in an unethical way, they might accumulate it in perfectly ethical ways that generally are positive sum that make everybody better off on the way up, including their employees, including their customers, whatever. Even if it's done in all the best ways, it leads to a situation where the person with $100 billion is so difficult for other people to look at. Humans are just naturally wired to view each other in terms of comparison, in terms of comparing where I'm at in this hierarchy versus other people. And when a large portion of the population looks at what feels like an alien group to them, a group of people that are powerful, living among them, untouchable, and so far beyond them that they could never hope to play the same games,
Mm.
it's just an incredibly destabilizing force that politicians and people seeking to rise to power are over and over and over. They use extremely effectively to incite violence and to rise to power. And it's almost inevitable, in my opinion, that it will happen once you have a certain set of conditions arise and a certain level of discontent that is arising from these inequalities. But what seems different today is that the the robber barons of 2021, so to speak, are not Cornelius Vanderbilt, who has the system of railways that's just inherently tied to the land that he's in, or Carnegie, who has these ginormous steel plants that are physical plants that he cannot move. They're in Pittsburgh. He's got to make his steel there. He can only use the buildings and machines that he's got to make the steel, or same with Rockefeller, whatever. Now you have people who own code, who own software, who own intellectual property, who own abilities to create wealth that are not tied to any geography. And you have people who are able to earn an incredible amount and create a incredible amount of value with their minds without relying on huge populations of laborers to create it. You have fewer and fewer and fewer employees, less and less and less physical infrastructure needed to become an extremely of business. And so in the past, you could very easily, as a government, um, basically you have all the power, you have all the keys. You can, if you want to repossess all of the railroads, you can do it. If you want to tax somebody at 90%, you can do it. They can't go anywhere else because this is the only place where they can earn anything. It's 10% versus 0%. You can't take your steel plant over to Mexico. It's right where it is. You can't take your steel plant over to the Philippines. It's right where it is. And even if you could, you couldn't ship your stuff back and get your raw materials and stuff. It just wouldn't work. But now you have, especially, you had it a little bit in the Facebooks and the Ubers and the Googles of the world, but you really didn't have it because you still had that need to be in Silicon Valley. You still had that need to be where the talent, where the capital was, and where the system was, where everything was going. Now you're having the rise of crypto, where some of the richest people in the world in 10 years are sitting today in Estonia. They're sitting today in Bulgaria. They're sitting today making this wealth, building what they're building, completely dispersed all around the world. They don't have to be anywhere. You can't hold them to where they are. And you can't even get their money if you want. They don't have a factory that you can go seize. They don't have a giant oil field that you can go take over with force. They're it's money, it's resources that can't be grabbed, they can't be throttled. Governments have no power over them. And I think that it will be more and more feasible to build extremely powerful wealth generating companies, businesses in finance first, and then in many other industries, especially information technology. But eventually, it could encompass physical goods as well, where governments no longer have the means to let out some of the steam by redistributing wealth. They no longer have the means to pump some brakes on somebody or keep a certain class of people in check because they're not beholden to any government. They can go wherever the hell they want. They can go anywhere in the world, and there's 200 different governments that, in theory, will want these high producing, high creating individuals to be there. And so you won't have the same tools at your disposal to play around with this game. And furthermore, who are you going to have a revolution against if all the people that are extremely rich and successful have already moved to the Maldives and the UAE and to Singapore, and they're not conglomerated anywhere, they're totally separate, and oftentimes you can't track where they are, you can't even track what they own. And so how is this going to play out? Because I think the inequality is just going to get more and more extreme, but it's going to become much more, individuals are just going to become far more slippery than they ever were, and their wealth is far more slippery than it ever was. And so what do you think this could lead to? How do you think people will react when you have a whole class of people that are extremely rich, but they're actually untouchable?
I guess they will be part of the extremely rich people, but there will also be rich people because tied to their production values, because uh, definitely still there have to be made some railroads and so
Yeah.
on, and still there have to be built housing and build all those institutions that are necessary for all this for the stability of our society. So Hey. So the sun has set. Um, I will. I think that the individuals that actually have this much wealth created through their ability working with code and media or being part of early crypto, they will be sovereign individuals and untouchable. Like they don't they exist, but they can do good without other people knowing that they are the cause. Or they will
Mm-hmm.
gather in communities um, where same-minded people, similar-minded people, just gather and try to experiment because the legislation of this special nation or state or even just a place of land, a piece of land, this legislation allows them to experiment with their own health or longevity or what have you. I guess there will be parts where in the world where much more experimentation can go on than nowadays is possible inside the EU or inside the US or wherever you are. And so the future will emerge in those parts where this experimentation and this evolutionary process will be possible, will emerge. But then through the rise of the internet and through the technology, it is also possible to distribute the wealth they created through this experimentation much faster to everybody else. So this positive sum games will accelerate much faster, I believe. And either way, the inequality rises all the time, but what have you? You have much more wealth and less poverty than all the times in history before.
Mm-hmm.
So if we play positive sum games on and on and on, then eventually you don't need much revolution to redistribute the poverty. You just
Yeah.
need a little bit redistribution through merging a little bit of capitalism and merging a little bit of socialism together, so that neither the one or the other overrules what is being done and how people behave. But I guess that's one passage of the book actually really resonated with me as well, where I thought, okay, yeah, actually capitalism is the way to go and to keep a country producing wealth. But in my early youth, I thought, okay, socialism is the best thing because people get free lunches and so on. But now I
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, that's actually true what he says when he says that it's a natural for both of them to align and to merge together, so that it's a part of capitalism, so that the people who actually make stuff are still incentivized to make stuff and not to slack off, and a bit of socialism for the people who are not as rich to not resent the real
Mm-hmm.
rich people. So you just have to live, you just have to be able to live a decent life without poverty, and then you have no necessity for a revolution, and the other people can be as rich as they want to be as long as they do no harm to the other parties involved in the land or whatever. There will be no revolutions. But concerning how the ecosystem and the planet and so on will suffer through the behavior of some people, I cannot judge this one. But there we have it again, through the rise of crypto, through the technology that evolves there, the geography will be much less important. It
Yeah.
will be just uh, you can be everywhere in the world if you have the means to travel and to live there.
Yeah. Yep. And one last point I really wanted to get your perspective on that I think is really interesting is back to this religion idea, because I think that the obviously the levels of religion in the West have been excuse me, the levels of religion in the West have been in significant decline for the past 150 years since Darwin, or 160 or whatever it's been. And more and more, you see the decline at the top, the most powerful people who are really controlling much of what goes on. In the 20th century, you had the dissolution of religion in many societies that in turn invented their own religion, their own humanist religion, in order to capture the people and to fulfill the ends that the leaders of the society had, which of course are communism and Nazism, when we're thinking of the major humanist religions that were invented in the 20th century. These utopist visions that we could create this incredible society, either that will save the human race from disintegration and from being outcompeted and sort of this enfeebling of our stock that could lead to our destruction. And so we need to pursue this route of salvation for all of humanity, or we need to overthrow this class. And so everything in society, everything in life can be viewed through this one lens. There's this good and evil. There's this capitalism versus communism, and everything is aligned along this one axis. This is everybody's system of belief, and everybody has to believe it. And those two ideologies were just incredibly powerful. When you use a religion that's basically invented by people explicitly trying to gain power, or not necessarily explicitly, but really clearly trying to gain power. When you're looking at Lenin, when you're looking at Trotsky, when you're looking at Hitler, it's incredible how far you can go in co-opting these systems that humans have within their brains, these capacities and this desire to orient themselves towards one simple system of belief, that you can do incredible harm by getting everybody along this exact same system of belief and using it to have these very powerful memes in terms of how you can use them to unite a people towards a common ends or against a common enemy. And I think today you are starting to see the rise of new religions again in the past probably 5 years. I think you're seeing a new religion on the right, which is the sort of right populism, where there's this cult of personality. Everybody wants to look at this one Donald Trump, or their country's version of Donald Trump, and worship everything he says, believe all the things that he says that are just very easily falsified. Our side believes this set of facts. This is our set of dogmas. This is our set of myths, basically. And then you have on the other side, on the left, you're seeing this new religion of anti-racism emerge, where they have their sacred texts, they have their taboos, they have their leaders, they have their rules and the things that you can and can't do. They have their original sin that everybody needs to try to work to overcome. And you have on both sides these new rising religions of what I would consider like right populism versus like wokeism. And they're taking over this vacuum that we have in our society now. It's in Western society now that Christianity has declined so far. And it's concerning because they're continually evolving. When you're looking at how the right side of things has co-opted anti-vaxxing, and how powerful that's been, and how that's really made people ignite with this fervor for their side, and it's become an incredibly tribal issue, and it's something that speaks very deeply to human nature in terms of our fear and disgust of foreign things inside of our bodies. And on the left, just as much, you have this moral panic and this ability to co-opt our system of social, like our social monkey mind, where everybody constantly is vying for status, and there's this zero-sum knife fight amongst themselves to out-woke each other and to out-cancel each other, and to try to adhere the loudest to their religion by proclaiming bolder and bolder and bolder things in more and more public places, and taking stands against people, and really trying to carve out their spot in this religion. And it's honestly, it's fascinating. It's a little bit, and I think clarifying to view it through these lenses, but it's also terrifying to see wow, we really have this power vacuum left in our society by religion. These these could evolve in so many ways. These could mutate so far beyond where they currently are. And there's very much a potential for new religions along these like political religion lines to take hold and to capture the mind space of significant chunks of the world.
Definitely, there are powerful memes of, like you call it, wokeism and the right wing um, belief systems of anti-vaxxing and so on. And what concerns me as well is the speed with which those ideas and memes just travel the world. Like you told about the people who worship Donald Trump, and eventually that goes into Telegram channels and so on as well, and then spreads through whole Germany and also reaches my parents, for example.
Yeah.
And now my father is a fan of Donald Trump, and guess what? He's not waxed.
Yeah.
So this speed of the most effective meme, which triggers the most effective fear, and the most effective defense mechanisms, travels now the fastest and reaches more people and evolves through the people and evolves through discussions with fact checkers or what have you. But definitely everybody wants to believe in something. You cannot believe nothing. And this is the point of it. Every human has an ingrained need to believe in something. So if religion or if your spiritual habits are declining, then you necessarily, if you watch the news, you will find something new to believe in, or a new status game to play. And most of the times, if you just play status games, it's a zero-sum game. You take away credibility from others, or you speak outright. You don't allow others for certain convictions to hold. But you forget to play the positive sum games where you discuss in a civilized manner. But I understand that's not really possible in the light of memes that trigger fear and trigger the ego. And actually, when you think about those memes isolated, then they are really powerful. You have to convince yourself of your own rationality to not fall prey for those wrong beliefs. But because they are so easy to believe, that makes them so powerful. And yes, as we talked about before, I believe that knowing the truth will bring us, ourselves and humanity much further than holding false convictions that lead to decline of some people or institutions, or lead to revolutions or
Yeah.
overthrown governments, or more polarization of all the population living within those belief systems that are right now newly arising. So I believe there will be a big change coming in the next decade, where the whole political systems will change a little bit, where the monetary system will change a little bit. Like we've seen the rise of crypto, and the people who played, who were part of it early, will manage all this money that can be distributed in an instant and make productive people in all places in the world at the instance of a click of a mouse or a button or whatever. and those will be the most powerful people, like the Medici in Italy in the
Yeah.
Renaissance and so on. And coming back to the book, there's one part again which he quotes: "The men who can manage men manage the men who can manage only things, and the men who can manage money manage all."
Yes.
So those sovereign individuals who have the means and the money to be free have also the means to create change, to create evidence, to do research from all around the world through proof of work or through proof of workout, with the incentive structures of spreading some crypto to the people who do the proof of work, or who do the work, or who do the proof of workout.
Yep.
So exciting times are ahead, and definitely am excited how it will play out. But this book definitely gives a big perspective,
Yeah.
a big perspective about the patterns and the cycles of history, and that history does not repeat itself like it was, but definitely some parts of it can repeat from time to time.
I like how he puts it. He says, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Yes, yes. It's like poetry, and there's no humorist like history.
Yeah. Very true.
Yes. It's such a great book.
Agreed.
The concentration of wealth is a natural result of this concentration of ability, and regularly recurs in history. And then he compares the systole and diastole of a heartbeat with the concentration of wealth and then the redistribution of wealth again. And I guess we now have seen in the latest times, like the last 20, 30 years, that the concentration now rose and rose and rose. Now I'm waiting for the other part of the heartbeat as well. And what do you say to his point? That perhaps it is one secret of their power that, having studied the fluctuations of prices, they know that history is inflationary and that money is the last thing a wise man will hoard. What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's so true. It really is. And it's also interesting to think though that that is one of the fundamental things that crypto is trying to change. Throughout history, money has always been inflationary. It's just in the nature of pretty much all monetary systems that have ever been created. But now there's this huge alternative of deflationary money. And what is that? How does that change the fundamental power dynamics? How does that change how spoils accrue to people who hold different types of assets? And you're seeing for the first time people getting rich from fundamentally holding money when it comes to Bitcoin. And so does that, I wonder if there are implications of that we're not realizing.
Maybe, but the variety of different possibilities of money to hold that are deflationary inflates again. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there
Very
are
true.
many dimensions that will play out, and I'm definitely excited how they will play out. But I guess the paradigm that we will encounter is that if you build a decentralized autonomous organization with smart contracts in the blockchain, and you manage to reorganize a tribe around that and do something useful for society, and you coin your own coins and people join and the coins are deflationary, then eventually you can win as well a part of this
And maybe
asset.
you make your own religion out of it and make it
Yes,
even
why
better.
not? People need to believe in something, so why
Yeah.
not giving them the food, the food of thought and food of belief.
Yeah. If you have two cryptocurrencies, They're all the same, except one of them can make their followers religious. That one's gonna win.
Yes, definitely. Yes, make them religious and wealthy. Then,
Yeah.
yes. Why not? Hey, great. Peyton, it's been a pleasure discussing the book with you. Um, Now we will turn my attention back to my girlfriend again because she arrived again. And the sun is now set, as you can see around me. There's
Mm-hmm.
darkness.
Yes.
But now at your place, what time is it now?
It's 2:24, and so it's looking beautiful out here. I think it's probably um, maybe 23 degrees Celsius, something like that. So a very beautiful day, nice and mild. I think I will get a little bit of work done, maybe go see the sunset tonight,
Mhm.
and yeah, just try to get ready for the week. I think this will be a big week for me, and so I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot going on. So
Yes.
some preparation, some reflection, and some
Oh,
solitude to kind of prepare will be nice.
nice. What is one thing about your week that you definitely want to prepare well for, that you want to go well, that is a decisive thing?
I'm still, I know that I'm sounding like a broken record with this, but I'm still trying to finally buy this business. And I think it's finally going to happen this week.
Hmm.
The lawyers are all bickering amongst themselves and arguing over very minute details and kind of delaying it. But I think that they're finally going to get on the same page, hopefully, knock on wood, by the end of the week. And so if that happens, then I'll have a lot to learn. I'll kind of be jumping in and learning a new business and how to run it and all of the processes that go on in the sort of small construction projects. And so
Yes.
it would be one, I would really like for it to finally happen, although I plan to accept whatever happens, whatever timeline. And if it does, it will be very much an intense jumping in, working very hard for at least the next few months, and really taking on many new challenges that I've never faced before, especially leadership and trying to manage a group of people every day for the first time. I think that will be my biggest and most important challenge. And so I hope to be um, I hope to do well. I hope to be able to do it in a way that everybody's happy and that works for everybody. But I'll need to find my own style. I'll need to learn many things. I'll need to be humble and kind of grow in emotional intelligence in a lot of things. But I feel very eager to learn and absorb and ready to talk to a lot of people for advice and to really try to become a student of it. And I recognize that I have a long way to go, and so I think that that will be a good potential area of growth for me as a person.
Man, that sounds like a beginning of a really nice and exciting journey. And
Certainly exciting.
I hope that everything will go well this week for you, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'll keep you posted on how it goes. I wouldn't be surprised if I have some tests from the Stoic gods to share with you at some point.
Like always, yes. I
Yes.
really enjoy your perspectives. And
Yes.
let's talk about the next book we're gonna talk about. Finally, something from Taleb, like
Yes.
Risk and His Price, or what is it called?
Um, would you be meaning Fooled by Randomness or The Black Swan or Anti-Fragile or Skin in the Game
Skin in
or
the Game, yes. The German
I love
title
that
is
book.
The Risk and His Price. Its
Oh,
Price.
okay.
Like das Risiko und sein Preis, yes.
Do you read most of your books in English or in German?
It depends. Some of the books don't have a translation into German, so it's necessary for me to to read some of them in English. That's actually uh, really valuable because English is the language with the most available books and
Yeah.
ideas, and definitely worth it. So this one I will be reading in German. But this one was not available when I bought it in German, but now it is actually. I will gift it to a friend of mine. He's actually a Catholic priest. Yes.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, because
cool.
I enjoy his perspectives, and now I want to give him this input of the perspectives of a person who 50 years of his life wrote about perspectives in history, and then he has the ability to figure out how his life fits into these cycles of history, and maybe he can give forward to other people that he holds his preaches for.
That would be great. Yeah, I'm sure I'll like it.
Great, then skin in the game it is for the next
In the game
session.
it is. I love that book.
Me too, man. Thank you, Peyton. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate it that you take your time and have this beautiful conversation with me.
Likewise, brother. It's truly always a pleasure. It's really fun to talk about this shit for me.
Yeah,
So
man.
very grateful that we have this going on. Very much looking forward to the next session and discussing the book.
Yes. And finally, we can load this up to YouTube if you don't mind.
Oh, great idea. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
we
awesome.
We will have this World of Ideas channel, and then we just load up that. We have this
Perfect.
conversation. Yes.
Yeah,
Great.
love that idea.
World of Ideas.
World of ideas.
Peyton, have a great day.
You as
Thanks
well,
for
my
your
brother.
time.
Yes.
Bye, man.
Enjoy your week. Until next time.
Enjoy.
When I tell people about this thing that we're doing and trying out, it's like, yeah, honestly, even if the recordings never worked, I would still like really want to do it because
Yes.
it's like my favorite conversation of the week.
Yeah. Hey, same for me as well. I now said to my girlfriend, now go out to the lake, enjoy the sunset. I'm down with Peyton recording a podcast. I will join her later, but the sun is going down right now. Maybe it's an hour for an hour, but then the color set in. Maybe I will join her then. So,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
It seems like you live in such a wonderful location, man. I love
Yeah.
that you have sort of, it seems that you have sort of a mix between urban and nature that is very rare to find.
It's so valuable because I thought it's one of the most beautiful places on earth to live because of this combination of urban and nature. And I thought to myself, okay, when I live somewhere, then I have to live in a place where I can go into nature, but I also can enjoy people and life and so on. So I settled here, and I definitely want to stay for a bit.
How long do you think you'll stay?
I guess 2 years now, and then my girlfriend and I plan to travel a little bit. But then again, I will come back to Switzerland as well, because Switzerland is one of the favorite places in the world for me.
Yeah, with good reason. I think that there's a decent chance that I'll end up in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Seems like a terrific place to be.
Yes, definitely come visit. That I'll show you around. It's so close, so close. Everything is so close. You go over the border, not even at the border. You go through a tunnel, one of the largest tunnels in the world. Like I told you, it's about 50 miles or something.
Crazy.
And then there's a whole different climate there, whole different vegetations, and it's all about the Alps as a high mountain filter of the weather. So. And they speak Italian through the tunnel, and a little bit further they speak French, and it's great.
I love that. Do you speak any Italian or French?
No,
Not yet.
Je ne parle pas le français, mais je veux apprendre. I don't speak French, but I want to learn it. So that's
L'accent, c'est super, quoi.
Je ne parle pas le français. Je n'entends.
You have a good accent for it when you speak it, though. You sound like you know it.
You speak French, definitely, isn't it?
Yeah. Although now it's been so long since I was living in France that it's gotten. I think I was at like a B2 level, and now I've fallen to a B1 level. So only so, but I'd like to get good again, honestly.
Yes.
But here in America, nobody speaks it, so it's hard to
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. Definitely languages are for using them. So best you go into a country and then dive fully into it and go directly into it, and then you speak at a whole different level and you use it. It's like the brain. The brain becomes the way you use it frequently and
Hmm.
with high intensity, and that's the same for language, I
Yeah,
guess.
so true. So true.
So, there's a good book about this process of learning. It's called Ultra Learning from Scott Young. I'm not sure
Oh,
if you
really?
heard about
I've
it.
I think I've heard the title, but I actually don't know anything about it.
It's
Ultra
nice.
learning.
Yeah, Ultra Learning. Try it because in one chapter he tells about his experiment where he and a friend go to Spain to dive right in, and 2 months are not allowed to speak any English, so they
Mm.
have no other option but to learn the language to a level where they can speak and express themselves in a way uh, they
That's
enjoy it.
great.
Yeah.
Nothing helps you learn a language better like hunger.
Yeah, that's great. We'll see.